are you going to be ready to meet your father when he comes running to you, when he hears you on radio and probably sees you on TV? I mean, I thought I was born for a career on radio.
Mm-hmm.
And these people, even with my life back then, looking like it was doom and gloom, felt that I was going to become a famous journalist eventually, and that my father was going to come running to me. And I told them that I wasn't ready to meet my father, and I wasn't going to be for a very long time. And in fact, I wanted to meet him on my own terms. And as you know, I was only ready in 2008.
Mm.
And so that's when I took a decision to change my name. And the process itself was very irritating because we had to page through books and magazines to try and find a name. And it was when I was listening to Peter Tosh and looking through his history that I realized that his real name was Winston Hubert McIntosh. And I just fell in love with the name. And after we struggled to find a surname, I mean, the McNamara suggested McNamara, Cheryl Wood suggested Wood, and it just didn't go with McIntosh.
Mm-hmm.
I eventually settled on my father's name, the surname, which was Nzimande. And for a very long time, when I worked for ETV, I was McIntosh Nzimande. It was only after 2008 and after I met my father that I decided again to change my surname to Polela.
And the name Polela comes from?
Polela comes from that moment that I described earlier, when I was standing over the Polela River and contemplating suicide and realizing that there was reason to live,
mm-hmm.
even through poverty, through the brutality of abuse. And that was for me the day I chose to live. And so Polela to me signifies the very meaning of life.
So your name is so symbolic of where you are today, McIntosh.
It is. It is. It's the day I chose life. And I'm enjoying my life.
Mm.
And every time you say Polela, for me, Polela is the meaning of life itself.
Oh, it's wonderful. McIntosh, you mentioned in the book, people talk about, well, you know, your father endured abuse himself. He was abused, so he is an abuser. And we hear that same old story of people who were abused, children who were abused, become abusers themselves. You experienced extreme abuse. You experienced extreme poverty. And yet abuse is something that you would never consider, you know. What is it that is... What has happened to you that you're able to look at abuse and see it as something that is wrong and separate it and not see it as something that is the way of life?
I think it's because I experienced both extremes. I experienced being loved by my mother. I experienced the abuse and the brutality and the pain it brings to you.
Mm-hmm.
And, the smallness to which you get reduced when you are abused. And then I experienced love from the McNamaras, from Cheryl Wood, and all the people that trusted in me. And so I know what it's like to be loved and to be told that you're good at something. And so as a result of that, I can never choose to abuse someone because I know what it reduces the person to, the pain that the person goes through when they're abused. As I'm sitting and talking to you, my daughter is in the house, and then she's entering her teens.
Mm-hmm.
I've never raised my hands on her. Ever since she was a very small child, I've always talked to her because I believe that communication, not raising your hand and not abusing someone, makes someone a great person. And I'm very proud that I can sit here and raise a beautiful daughter and a very responsible daughter. But I think that she is responsible. She is proud of herself and who she is because she's never been abused, because she's always been loved. She's told every time she's achieved something that she is great, and she looks forward to doing more great things. And so I can never contemplate abuse because I know what it's like. It's difficult for me to accept and understand that a person who is abused then tends to be an abuser themselves when abuse is so painful, when you feel downtrodden, you feel so small when you are abused. I'm not going to sit and judge that person because who am I to judge them?
Right.
But I find it very difficult to understand it and to accept it.
McIntosh, have you been in touch with your father since this book has been released?
No. I was in touch with my father for a period of a year when I told him that I forgave him for killing my mother and I forgave him for robbing me of my childhood. And I went through a process where I wanted to build some sort of a relationship with him. And that relationship, I suddenly realized that was never going to be built because my father is flawed beyond redemption. And so when I found out who he was, and when he showed it to me, to my face, that he found pleasure and pride in having killed my mother and getting away with it, I realized that I had to focus on myself, that I had to be selfish a little to continue being sane and to continue to achieve something of myself. And so we don't have any relationship. But I have a relationship with his many children and with his ex-wife, who is described in the book and who is a great person. And they came to the first launch in September, and we continue talking.
And are you in touch with any of your relatives from the Underberg area who you've written about when you talk about abuses and the times endured there?
Indeed, I am in touch with them, and I treat them as members of my family. Because when they abused me, they were almost like monsters. But when you grow up in poverty and you share in the poverty, and you grow up together and you go to university, and the same people who abused you offer to help you, and they do help you in some way, you start to see a different side in them. You start to see a human side in them. And it was easier for me to forgive them. And it's easy for me to continue to treat them as members of my family. And so I go to Underberg sometimes to experience the beauty of Underberg and the Sunny Pass and the Drakensberg Mountains, but also to visit the people in the family, because some of them were abusers. Some of them, like my gogo, were just great people. And so how can I forget those people?
And McIntosh, you went from, you worked in radio, you worked with ETV, on television as a journalist, award-winning, and then you studied, you got your master's in England, and now the spokesperson for the Hawks, which, let's be honest, I mean, it's quite controversial. I mean, you're dealing with controversial issues all the time. It's arms deals and members of police, high-ranking members being questioned for all sorts of things. We get your comments on lots of issues. It's such a turnabout of where you came from, wanting to be a radio journalist and now a spokesperson for the Hawks. But for you, on a deeper level, is it you righting the wrongs of the world? Is that how you see your role in any way at the Hawks?
I don't know. I mean, when I became a journalist, I thought, as foolishly as certain journalists think that I was going to change the world. When I realized that I was too small to change the world, I resorted to writing my book. And after that, I mean, I think I just chose the job at the Hawks because it was a job available. But eventually, with hindsight, I'm thinking that the job actually chose me. I mean, I thoroughly enjoy what I do, and I live by the principles that I lived under when I was a journalist, in that I will never lie. If something is not to defend, I will not defend it. I will always admit the truth, and let the truth set you free. And my bosses understand what I'm about. And so far, we've done very well. I mean, when we hit the wrong house going into Cratchit, I used an Impala to break somebody's gate and break somebody's garage. There are people who whispered to me after I said, yes, we did it. We broke the garage. We broke somebody's house. It was wrong, and we will pay it. And some people whispered to me, and they were lawyers, and said, you don't admit these things. But my principles are to be speaking the truth all the time, and I live by that. And so for me, it's not difficult at all. But subconsciously, people have asked me, have I chosen this job because I needed to right the wrongs of the past and to fight on the side of the abused and the victims? I don't know if I chose it because of that. Maybe it was a subconscious decision, but I enjoy having to work to solve people's problems, because if you've had somebody in your family killed, you want to find justice.
Absolutely.
People don't find justice all the time, but I think that I feel great that I can try and help them to find justice, to talk on their behalf. Because every time I talk tough on criminals, I talk on behalf of the abusers. I speak on behalf of the downtrodden. I speak on behalf of the victim.
You writing a book like this, I mentioned it earlier, you are literally peeling away layers of skin, and you are allowing people to have full access to that part which many of us hide. We protect ourselves and we hide it. And you have opened yourself up to everyone, and you've said, this is me. This is what I'm about. And that must have taken a lot to get to that point. But I want to ask you, did you find people's reactions towards you, relationships change after they had read this book about you?
I find that people have, always say they have great respect for me after sitting on a table with me for years and not knowing what I went through, and suddenly realizing that they didn't know me. I find there are people who haven't read my book, who've just had read a bit of transcripts in newspapers, who are cynical and say, "So you want our sympathy?" And I always know that when somebody says that they haven't read my book, because my book is not wallowing in my grief and looking
not
for
at
sympathy.
All. Mm-hmm.
It's a journey, and it's a life-changing experience for so many people. And I'm glad that those people are in the minority. And so I find that people look at me differently. They have a lot of respect for me. But also, people who thought that they knew me and had their own problems stand up and say, "I have this problem." I have, looked at a tall, big man at gym saying to me, "I think that you are very bold having done what you have done." And then he starts to cry and tells me his problem. And this is a great looking man, a big man. And I think to myself, maybe I have done something to change people's lives. And it's very gratifying to see that.
McIntosh Polela, thank you very, very much for spending time with us. Your book, I found it inspiring. I was inspired. You did inspire me. And I think that you are a living example of, what you can overcome. And I really do think that everybody should read your book. And I thank you for sharing your story, because I do think that through your story, the sharing of what you went through, which is very painful and also painful for you to revisit, people are going to gain tremendously from that. So thank you, McIntosh. It has been an absolute pleasure chatting with you this morning.
I have had a great time talking to you. I always enjoy talking to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, McIntosh. Have a good one. Bye-bye. McIntosh Polela, that's his book, My Father, My Monster. And it is a book that you need to read. And I'm handing this over to you, Thabo, because I know that you're going to get a lot from it. McIntosh Polela, My Father, My Monster.